We really appreciate kind of everybody taking the time out of your day to join us. I know we're hitting end of quarter for some of you all. We've got a holiday around the corner. So we're really excited about today's conversation. So for those of you who we may or may not know, my name is Reese Williams. I'm one of the co-founders here at Domestique. Domestique's a RevOps consulting firm. My other co-founder, Alex, is he's managing kind of the chat, letting people in. If anything goes wrong here, it's definitely his fault. So anyways, we are really excited about the conversation today. So I'm going to introduce kind of our guest here, Karan Singh. He's currently the VP of Launch Darkly, VP of RevOps at Launch Darkly. Before that, he was at Sapphire Ventures, leading their kind of partner revenue excellence. Previous to that, VP of RevOps at Procore, so on and so forth. Cool little story about Karan. When I was just getting into RevOps, so I kind of built my career in sales ops, chief of staff, and then the last company I was at, they asked me to lead RevOps, and they came to me and was like, "Hey, can you lead RevOps?" I was like, "What is RevOps?" And like, I don't know, like you need to go figure it out. So like I happened to be at this conference where I saw Karan speak, and I literally just reached out to him like cold on LinkedIn, like, "Hey, saw you speak. Loved what you said. Any chance I can kind of pick your brain?" So he's kind enough to like offer me some time. And since then, I have leaned heavily on him over the last, 7, 8 years, something like that. You become a friend, a mentor. I'm truly grateful, but a lot of the RevOps best practices we use here today at Domestique are just gratuitously like good ideas that we've taken from you. And so anyways, you want to give a quick intro here today?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, this has been a long time coming, pal.
I know. I'm excited.
Wow. And I know I've been eager to find time with you and maybe in a broader audience like this and just, talk shop. So definitely excited for today. And what better topic than AI? I think it's sort of germane to all of us. But yeah, I think you gave a great introduction for me, Reese. I mean, I like to tell people I got hit with a lucky stick. I was early days at Cloudera, at Procore, and pre-IPO at ArcSight as well. The reason I bring these three companies up is one was cybersecurity, one was data warehousing, and one was vertical SaaS in the construction tech business. None of them have anything to do with the other, and now I'm in the DevOps space. So that's 4 completely different verticals, but in all of them, I'd say the commonality was the brand of revenue operations, how we thought about scale, how we thought about growth in an intentional fashion, how we were more avant-garde and sort of at the forefront in thinking about what's now and what's next. And it did. It helped these organizations all scale and become what I call forever companies. So I take little pockets of goodness from everywhere I've been, including Sapphire, where I was an operating partner, and learn from everyone. Every company has superpowers. Every company does something really well. And I've been able to take that into my tool belt and sort of bring it all together wherever I go next. And hopefully I can share some of that here with all of you around, again, the topic that we're going to cover off today. So excited for it. Looking forward to it.
Well, we are very grateful that you decided to kind of join us today. And as always, I'm extremely grateful for our friendship and partnership. So we're going to get into AI. AI is obviously the topic du jour in everything tech these days. I've been at a number of kind of RevOps and tech conferences here recently, and it's all anybody's talking about. And there's a common theme, like everybody's asking, everybody feels behind, and everybody wants to understand, what are we doing about it? So today we're going to dive into a couple of specific things. We're going to talk about like, why now and why does this matter? We're going to then actually get into some tactical AI use cases, because like one of the things that we try and do here at Domestique is we try not to be those types of consultants that just talk at a high level of like, hey, go find a unicorn. Good luck with that. We want to actually give you some use cases that you can come out of today of like, oh, okay, I can go implement this at my company. And then we're going to talk about like, what does this mean for RevOps and go-to-market, future of RevOps with this, not only from a role specific things like that. And finally, we're going to kind of talk about like, where is all this going? So we're going to dive into this. A couple of important things, and I think those of you who joined earlier in the call probably saw this. We love it when people ask questions. We'd much rather this be an interactive question. You got a question, come off mute, jump in, you toss something in the chat. Alex is monitoring the chat. We will do this. We're also going to send out the recording here after we get into this. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So, Karan, I'm curious, why don't you just kind of baseline us a little bit of like, give us a little like 30-second overview about how do you think about, RevOps? And then as we're thinking about this AI, like why now and why does this matter?
Yeah, and again, well, to start RevOps, I mean, to me, this is probably the most important discipline within revenue. Obviously, I'm biased. People ask me all the time, what is RevOps? And maybe I'll just start with that. To me, it's the prioritization engine and the connective tissue for a revenue organization. And the way that we look at RevOps as a whole, how do we sort of determine if we're doing well or not? It's through the lens of seller productivity. So start with that as the baseline, right? We are the only function outside of maybe the CRO in name that actually looks across all of revenue. Everyone else is a little bit more siloed. We're the only ones that really spend the time to talk about, hey, how do we say yes to go from good ideas to great ideas, say no to good ideas, instead go after great ideas. So to me, again, foundationally really important. And as I think about how go-to-market is evolving and has evolved over, say, the 15 plus years that I've been doing this, there's always been sort of iterative optimization that we've done, new best practices that have popped up, and how do you think about centers of excellence and specialization, this, that, and the other. I've never seen it go as fast as it has with the advent of AI. Over the last 3 or 4 years, it feels like we're in a different discipline within, just a blink of an eye. And so I do think AI is highly relevant for us within RevOps, but really broadly in revenue. And I'll tell you a story about this, which I think will be interesting. So maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, when I was at Sapphire Ventures, that's when the whole generative AI movement really started kicking off.
Yep.
Right. And I remember it happened, OpenAI became a thing, and all of a sudden, maybe like 2 months, 3 months after that, I got poked by maybe 3 or 4 different sort of organizations to say, hey, can you come and speak and do a panel around what AI means in revenue? I just kind of looked around and said, what do you mean? This thing just started. I don't know. And anybody who tells you that they know is lying to you.
Yeah.
Just started, right? And so my reaction there was, oh boy, this is coming really fast. So what I did instead was turn around and say, okay, let me go talk to a bunch of smart people in the AI space, whether it's product leaders of companies that are trying to sort of insert themselves into revenue and revenue tech, things like that, and just learn. And the thing that came up in that conversation was, and I remember there was one founder that said something to the tune of, look, AI is going to disrupt revenue before anywhere else. Why? Because if you hallucinate in a prospecting email, nobody cares. If you hallucinate in healthcare, people die. So where do you think people are going to go invest their time, effort, energy with AI, especially early on? And so I say all this to say, look, it's moving really fast in revenue because this is a place where it's more of a test bed. This is where you're going to see the most advancements quickly. But as a result, you can also see a lot of, let's call it false starts and misses that can happen if you don't do it the right way. So yeah, I think we're right at the forefront, Reese, but we just have to be really cautious about how we sort of step into this AI strategy within revenue as well.
So I love that you brought that up because the funny part is like I alluded to some of these conferences I've been at now, and like I still feel like there's a lot of people who are speaking on this who still don't have a full grasp of kind of like what's going on. So what's cool is so we've got a lot of not only RevOps practitioners, but we also have a lot of kind of like go-to-market leaders, CROs, CMOs, stuff like that on the call today. You just made the comment about like we have to be thoughtful about how we start to step into this, and we need to start to step into this. What like talk to us, talk to me a little bit about like what do you mean about being thoughtful about stepping into this? What are some of the first steps if you out there, on the webinar are feeling behind? By the way, everybody's feeling behind. Like, what are some of these first steps you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, look, one, I think we have to be comfortable with testing, iterating, and making quick decisions around AI in a way that maybe we weren't as much before. I've actually already burnt my hand on the stovetop with AI a couple of times before. I'll give you one story on this one. So remember early on in this whole AI sort of tilt with revenue, all this notion around personalization at scale became a thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Here's the interesting thing. There was a time right at the beginning of that journey where everyone said, hey, you know what? Here's all these tools that can help you personalize because you know that Reese went to play golf in college, so therefore and thusly we'll be able to engage them in a more meaningful way with the script that we write, all that. It lasted for about a month, maybe 2 months. And then it was white noise because it was personalization at scale from everyone. And all of a sudden, it's like what we did with outreach back in the day, where everybody knows when they're in a sequence. Everybody now knows when they're being personalized at scale as well, right?
Yep.
I bought a personalization tool early on at Launch Darkly. Lasted 2 months, and all my leaders said, we can't use this. And so it became shelfware, right? But what I didn't do was over-rotate to it and say, hey, I spent money on this. It can't be shelfware. You guys are missing out on the AI train if you don't do this. No. Step back and listen and learn from your peers. Listen and learn from the people, from the customer and the environment. Look at the data. Look at your conversion metrics. Are you seeing step function improvements in your SMART goals and things to that effect? If the answer is no, then this is a perfunctory exercise, right? You did something, you bought a tool for the sake of buying a tool, things like that. Some of that will happen because it's moving so fast, you can't vet everything out perfectly. How quickly you jump from there, I think is critically important. So one, that happens, right?
Yep.
Two, the way that I've gone about this, Reese, is I've sort of evolved my thinking on this, is this whole notion of like red ocean, blue ocean thinking, which is I brought my leaders into room together in an offsite maybe 6-8 months ago now and said, look, assume that we have nothing, no products, no CRM, no nothing, completely whatever, blue sky, blue ocean. What would you build knowing what you know now about all the tools that are available to you? And you quickly realize that where they focused their attention was naturally in AI-centric, AI native tools. And what you quickly realize that there is a subset of use cases that really matter to the customer, i.e. our sellers, and to our rev operators. And that, I think, evolved how I think about where we spend our time, effort, energy with AI versus being reactive to whatever the market is saying. Oh, personalization at scale is the next big thing, because that is where you make mistakes.
I love that. So takeaways here, kind of A/B test, the sunk cost fallacy, like don't be afraid to kind of walk away from bad things. And then getting the leaders in a room together and like asking from the ground up, but like building this. I know we're about to jump into some specific use cases that I know you and I have seen kind of like work really well. I think I saw a question from Diego beforehand. Diego, did you have a question? Maybe not. All right, Diego, if you do have a question, drop it in the chat. I saw a hand go up, but that could have been maybe eating a sandwich and accidentally hit the button. So, all right. So let's take, obviously we're talking to kind of at this high level, like we got to get on board with this kind of AI. We've got to be, we got to iterate quickly, things like that. What are some of the use cases you're seeing as like really good places to start with AI?
I'm going to go from easiest to maybe more complex.
Great.
Because let's start with the stuff that we can all do tomorrow. So the first thing so I break it up into maybe 3 big buckets. So the first thing that I think we've been all trying to do for a while with like pseudo AI solutions anyways, is give time back to sellers. There's a lot of stuff that we ask salespeople to do today that are sort of clerical activities that we need as leaders to understand, hey, competitive intelligence and reasons won lost and medpic and this, that, and the other, that frankly do not require human intervention the same way anymore. Right? And I'll give you the tool that we use. We use Gong. And what's funny is Gong is not this like next generation AI native generative AI tool. It's been around for a while. I mean, it was AI before we were calling it AI, right? Now, I think they've sharpened themselves with this new age platform and how to think about, Gong in the age of AI and all that. But conversational intelligence has been around for a while. We've been able to use that here at Launch Darkly, for example. And we're just taking away all the basic asks from the seller. So, hey, don't worry about filling out MedPick. You've already asked those questions in the conversations. So we can parse that out and fill it out for you. We can give you recommendations of what next steps are for this particular account. We can tell you who the competitors are within this account. We can tell you why you may have won or lost. We can suss those out with call briefs, etc. Why are we doing all this? Why am I prioritizing this? Is because I have a firm belief that, you know, nobody's the villain in their own story, Reese, meaning that sellers aren't avoiding improving their productivity and getting into accelerators because they don't care. They're not able to do it is because they have so much extra overhead that is not necessary. So the first one for me is an easy one, which is use all this like transcription and natural language processing AI stuff to translate into your system of record all the information that you need and the seller needs to properly run a sales motion and for you to know how to tune, tweak, and calibrate your go-to-market motion as a whole.
So love that. Along those lines, you mentioned Gong. We've also seen Scratchpad. Are there any other kind of tools out there that you like, that you recommend? And second question is, as you're using it, obviously you're pulling the kind of transcription into Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever the CRM is. How are you training the leaders to look at it? How are you training the AEs to like? How are you training to essentially say, "Hey, you no longer have to take these notes. Here are the insights you can actually use to actually be a better seller"?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually think that this is where part of the risk is. So Otter, Granola, Zoom, Gong, there's so many different tools that have transcriptions available to them, right? And ways to translate. And actually what I found when I first started digging into this space is everybody was using their own thing. Bring your own transcription tool, the thing that you're most comfortable with. I think people in my org, for example, love Granola. Granola's got really good note-taking, for example. I think that's fine and good, but you have to platform against something. You have to standardize against something. In fact, I'm trying to get my sellers not to use anything else. Sometimes your customer will say, hey, use X, Y, and Z instead. Like, I don't want you to use Zoom. I want to use X and Y. I get that, but generally try to platform against one solution so you don't overcomplicate it, because you lose a lot when you have disparate solutions. So that's one. And again, I think Gong has all these other sort of not peripheral, but complementary functionalities to it, where if you capture great recordings and transcripts, it can also help with things like coaching, for example, Reese, amongst others. So find a solution that is bigger than just the point action of recording, right?
Yep.
The second thing I would say is, like, there's also tools like Momentum and others out there that, you know, can actually take all these great recordings and transcription and help you translate it into your CRM. Gong does some of this natively, but you can expand that functionality. So I think that's an add-on to support what you're doing with Gong, for instance. So the point I'm trying to make here is the ubiquity of that knowledge. I think it matters more than anything else. How do you give everybody access to? Now, coaching, which, Reese, I think is probably the most important thing. It's like, what do you do with this knowledge?
Yes.
Is, to me, critical. And this is where the Ask AI features and the call briefs and things like that become hugely important as well. Because what I find is that sales leaders have a hard time spending hours and hours every day going through recordings, scorecarding them. It just doesn't happen. It's a great idea. It doesn't happen. And telling them that 2x speed is honestly a little tone deaf, right? And so can we use the same set of tools that I'm referencing and use it not only to record and transcript, but also score these calls? So then now, as a sales leader, I'm not looking at every call. I'm looking at the best ones and I'm looking at the worst ones. And the worst ones I'm coaching on and the best ones I'm learning from. It reduces the time spent internally and operationally, which I think is probably the most important thing we can do, and spends more time on the human connection, which is, I actually think, the real value of AI. AI is going to bring us closer to the human connection, not further away from it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think we're moving fast in this space, and I'm finding that this is the area where my sellers and sales leaders are saying I'm getting the most value out of.
Love that. Like, there's this common theme, and we're seeing as well, like, how do we have time back in the day, right? You think about the most valuable asset in life. It's not money, it's time. And that's what we're talking about here. So, all right, love it. We think about a crawl, walk, run in terms of like helping to automate CRMs, helping to automate that kind of note-taking. So we got the note-taking, the call scoring, and then the coaching from that. So that's kind of use case one. What are some of the other use cases you're seeing that like, hey, this is the next kind of like advanced version of this that people can go and do? today?
Yeah, and so I think sequencing definitely matters here. So one, My message to the teams was exactly this, Reese, that look, I can't ask my sellers and sales leaders to do more with less. I don't believe in that notion. It's such a platitude, right? It's such a generic statement. What I do need to do is give them time back first, which is like capturing all this exhaust data, taking some of the clerical activities away. And if I do that, and I know I've given them an hour a week, 2 hours a week back, I'm not going to let them just go figure out what to do with those 2 hours. And telling ourselves that they're just going to do more selling activities is also an incorrect statement. We have to decide what we do with that information or with that extra time. And the way that what I've done with it is actually focus on enabling the seller and training the seller. And I think I've told you this story before, Reese, and maybe I'll bring it up to the broader group. So I affectionately say this from time to time. My SDRs at Cloudera 5-7 years ago are now the VPs at Databricks and at Snowflake, right? I was with all of them, right? I was the guy that was sitting there and as their RevOps leader and the enablement leader. I'd love to say that we nailed it and trained and taught them how to do everything really well and command a message and command a sale and medic and this, that, and the other. No, we were growing 100% year over year. It was bubblegum and paper clips everywhere. And I'll tell you very openly, the talented ones invested in themselves, continue to train themselves, but I wouldn't say the vast majority were trained in an exceptional fashion. And I doubt that happened at their next stint, nor at where they are right now. Nobody's made time for seller readiness. The average seller's tenure in a company is what, 16 months. You have 6 months of draw. That means you're really there for less than a year doing anything. You're not learning in the current format. So right. I say this to say we have a whole generation of sellers that have not been given the proper training and development mindset and sort of support system to be the best at their craft to do special work. We have to change that. I think AI is a great place to do it. So the way that we're investing in it, for example, is we just bought SalesHood recently as a revised LMS. And within it, as there is the case with many different platforms, LMS platforms like this, there's AI role plays. And what I love about AI role plays is what you can go in there and tell them, look, let me tell you our value proposition. Let me tell you or upload all of our information about what our objections are, what our competitive posture, et cetera, et cetera. We train the bots, so to speak. And that spits back out for us. And SalesHood does this. A bunch of other tools like SalesHood do this as well. Second Nature, my friend Hillary Hadley over at Zoom used a long time for the same thing. Now you've built a bot out that is your persona, your target persona. And you can tweak and tune how obstinate they are, right? How challenging they are. Nooks is another one. We use Nooks for AI, by the way. For SDRs, rather.
Yes.
That's a great one for SDRs. And I'm talking even about sellers. And so now you have these personas out there. And you can use them as a seller to have 100 at-bats before you go speak with a customer or with a prospect. I think that's the biggest gift we can give these sellers, because it's not like they don't want to be trained, but they're asked to be trained with live fire all the time, right? Or in an academic setting where you're just talking to your sales leader and doing some sort of role play stuff. It just doesn't work. You need 100 at-bats. You need your 10,000 hours or equivalent of. And so for me, I'm taking those extra hours that I have, and we're going to go put it in role playing. AI role playing. We're going to teach our sellers. We're going to get them hyper productive. So by the time they get in front of a customer or a prospect, they're ready to rock. They can show our value proposition. They can competitively differentiate. They can do all the things we expect them to in a way that wouldn't have happened had we not done this. And they're going to get better in their next gig and their next gig and their next gig as a result.
How crazy is this? For the longest time, like if you were an athlete at all, like you spend 90% of what you do practicing before the game. And yet in the SaaS world that most of us have all grown up in, practice was always just, as you pointed out, live fire with the demos. Like it is, and particularly like you think about companies that sell in the enterprise, you only get so many at bats. Like it is wild. We have not spent more time on this, like practicing and thing like that. Love that. Like, is there any other tools that you would recommend, or Luster.ai? I'm not familiar with that one, Kyle, but that's great. Any other tools you recommend, and or anything else you're doing on the practice, whether you're scoring or things like that, that you recommend for people here?
Yeah, I'll answer that. And before that, just to kind of respond to what you said, which I think is right. It's crazy to me that it doesn't happen. You know what's funny? I buy technology all the time, Reese. And because I'm such an advocate of command to message, motion, things
Yes.
like that, I'm always waiting for the seller to follow the route and run the playbook. And I'd say 99 times out of 100, they're not running playbooks. They're order taking.
Yes.
And so in practice, it's just not happening the way that I'd want it to. So I think there's a big gap here, bigger than people admit, because I think it's a little, frankly, embarrassing for us as a discipline to say, hey, we have not practiced our craft the way that we need to. To answer your question on like, hey, what else tools, technology? I mean, look, we looked at Big Tin Can, we looked at Second Nature, we looked at SalesHood, we looked at a bunch to figure out what the right solution was. The thing that made us make the decision with SalesHood, for example, was because it was more than just AI role play. It was AI role play deeply connected with an LMS, right? The two things need to be integrated. There's no solution to be had. So that would be my main point of guidance: is don't go try to just keep attaching on the next AI, XAI solution. Notice two tools I've talked about is Gong and then is SalesHood. Neither of them are just AI. They are AI in a platform. Nooks actually feels and smells very similar as a parallel dialer. They have an AI tilt for sure. They're digital, sort of AI native, but they're bigger than just the AI sort of motion itself.
I was having this exact conversation with BC the other day, and he made the comment that, like, I feel like a lot of these AI point solutions are going to get bought up, acquired, consumed. And the point you're making, right, is don't think about like the point solution, but like that has broader capabilities. They're more of a platform.
I mean, the way I look at it is what we felt with, depends on what the age of most of the folks here are on the call. But remember when cloud was a thing and SaaS was a thing? And all of a sudden you're going from Siebel to Salesforce, and the differentiator is SaaS, and it's a cloud solution, and therefore, and thusly, now who talks about it? It's table stakes, right? How is it going to be any different with AI? At some point, AI is going to be table stakes no matter what and who you are. And by the way, it's moving fast and faster than most. So the question is, what else are you above and beyond that? If that is what you are, you will be SaaS, you will be AI, but what else, right? Yeah. And I think changing the mindset there, just because the newness of it gets exciting and you want to just over-rotate, but changing the mindset to think bigger than that, I think is important.
Love it. All right. So we've talked about like automatic node capture, giving sellers time back. We've talked about seller readiness, the enablement, getting to practice. What are some of the other use cases you're doing today?
I got one more good one that, and there's a bunch of others, but the one other that I'm a big fan of is this notion of next best action. Man, we've been talking about customer 360 and prospect 360 from when I was a little puppy, operator back in the day, right? So it's been around as in concept for a long time. It just hasn't happened in practice, right? I remember spending so much time with my data science teams at Cloudera, for example, and they used to talk to me about how they're going to build this neural network and this mesh and this so-and-so machine learning algorithm, and therefore and thusly we'll know exactly what to do now and next. And I was like, cool, that sounds good. What's a random forest algorithm? Doesn't make any sense to me, but you probably know because you're the 100-pound brain. And we spent a year trying to figure it out, and they kept pushing and pushing and pushing and delaying, and until at some point we just looked at each other and said, you can't do this, can you? It's because we weren't ready, right? The concept was always necessary, but it wasn't ready. I think we're at a point where that changes, right? So what does next best action actually mean to me? I think we have to be really precise about that, Reese. And the way I look at it is, so it has a lot to do with knowing the customer and then meeting them where they are, right? And then having some prescribed actions from there. So remember 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we had first party intent information, meaning, hey, leads came in, they touched the website, and we got scoring, and Marketo and Eloqua were the next great thing. 5 years ago, 6 Sense came in and said, let me talk to you about second party and third party. I can tell you what your G2 score is. I can look at anonymous. Bombora did this too. I can look at anonymous website sort of keyword matching, et cetera, et cetera. And that was a step function improvement. Now, with an AI layer on top, you can do what I think is the last piece of the puzzle, which is actually like scraping the web, going and searching 10Ks, and determining what people are saying are their corporate objectives, et cetera, et cetera. If you understand those three things together, right? It's almost like first party, second party, third party, and like fourth party. I don't know what to call it. All this different data together. And that fourth one is more AI centric. They're scraping the world and getting some sort of rationalization from. I think you do. I think you really understand your customer and your prospect and the right individuals in that prospect account to go after. Once you know what really matters to them viscerally and sort of, you know, at the highest order level, then you can use tools to help establish what that that narrative is for them. That's different than personalization at scale, where I go tell you, hey, you went to so-and-so college and you played golf. No. I know that your corporate objective in your recent 10K was a oneness initiative. And in that oneness initiative, you needed to do X, Y, and Z and reduce downtime risk. And therefore, and thusly, let me tell you why our value proposition matches, because here's what we think. Like that sort of behavior, I think is critical right now to meet our customers where they are. We use a tool, which I'm a big advocate of, Reese, called POCUS to do this. And POCUS has this beautiful mixture of like a PLGS motion where we're going in and pulling up all our product telemetry and information to figure out, hey, who should we reach out to based on internal telemetry, to 10K scraping, to 6 QAs from 6 cents plus, all together to give you directive plays, prescriptive plays as a seller. In other words, I walk into my inbox every morning in POCUS, and I'm trying to get to inbox 0. I have 5 plays I got to run this today because of all the signals we have. And here are the things you need to say to those individuals based on what we know about them. Make it science. And that is, to me, the next best action, and make it easy for the seller to go do that. It's not the only thing they do, right? You start with that, get to inbox 0, and then you can apply all the art that you want above and beyond that and all the uniqueness that you typically use to run a sales process. I get it. But start with the science. And I think that's made a big difference as well in driving pipeline generation and progressing deals in a way that I think is repeatable.
Love this. Like we're seeing this across all of our customers, are particularly trying to set up an outbound motion. The concept, instead of personalization, relevance. That's what you're talking about, of kind of like, what do they actually care about, and how do you meet that relevance? What I'm curious from a POCUS standpoint, like, how much are the AEs having to kind of like come in and they're saying, you know, it's saying, hey, here are your next best action. How much are they tweaking it? You know, how much personalization, or how much time are they spending kind of updating, like, oh, this isn't quite right, let's change that, stuff like that?
It's a good question. It depends by segment. I find as you go up the segmentation model, you have to tweak more. As you're down the segmentation model, it's a little bit less, but I'd say there's some tweaking for sure. Here's the thing. You probably heard this before, this notion of co-pilot versus autopilot with AI, right?
Yep.
And AI companies are really excited to position the autopilot. Hey, we can do everything for you automatically from start to finish. You just set it up. I think Clay's probably the one that's gotten the closest to doing some of that stuff with some of their sort of workflows and things like that. But generally, I'm a bigger believer in co-pilot. I think that we gotta be cybernetic humans, right? Somebody told me this a while back. It's like, look, we're cybernetic beings. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, an iPhone is a technology, a tool. Just because it's not integrated into your brain doesn't mean you're not cybernetic. You do everything with your iPhone. You're a cybernetic individual. It's the same thing with this AI stuff, right? Have access to all this information sort of consistently and use it to make great decisions, tweak, tune, and calibrate based on your intellect as well. I think it's the right place to be right now. Over the course of the next 5 to 7 years, do I think that changes? Yeah, I do think that changes. I think you become more autopilot than co-pilot. But right now, I think you got to give your sellers a little bit of space. Part of it is also, Reese, they're just not ready for it, right? Psychologically, they're not ready to just let go of the gas. And I think that's okay.
And I think that'll partially change, right, as we start to continue to get a new generation of sellers in there who've like now grown up with AI, stuff like that. We have a good question from Kyle in the chat. Kyle's essentially asking, how do you find the right balance of signals, right? There's so much data out there. as you're using, Focus or Common Room, things like that, what's the right balance of signals so that, reps are actually understanding, hey, this is the relevant and this is the message I need to use for that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kyle. I tell you, like, I don't know if I've got it completely nailed, but what I do have is a way that I approach this, which is that I don't do ivory tower signal definitions or anything like that. I'm going out with my sales leaders and having them help figure out what those signals are. We have the tools. The tools are easily accessible and customizable, and we can do all this sort of signal and intent tweaking. We do it together. And that ensures that they actually use those signals, that they have the willingness and desire to give us feedback on what's working, what's not working, that sort of thing. So on one end, it's the sellers. The second end is, frankly, I think you need to get product marketing and corporate strategy more heavily involved in this process, which I wouldn't always say was the case in the past, right? So I know, for example, I'll use Launch Darkly, what my messaging strategy is, what my positioning is. I know that if I am looking for observability at the point of release, and I know that what we care about is downtime risk, right? Meaning if you get CrowdStrike, so to speak, remember what happened with CrowdStrike a couple of years ago? We know that's what we care about because our product solves for it. Well, I know that that's the signal that I'm going to go scrape via 10Ks, right? Is folks that are worried about that, or they're worried about developer productivity, or that comes from my product marketing team as much as it comes from my field. So it's a mixture. I try to get my big 100-pound brains on one end, product side, to tell me what is it that we care most about. And then on the other side, I make sure I have a bi-directional loop or rather a feedback loop from the field to say what's actually working in practice. And it's working fairly well for us so far. I think we can keep getting better. I think we'll know over the years, it's not about one answer. It's about building a framework or sort of a motion to continually answer the question.
Love it. It's not that dissimilar than what we did 5, 6, 7 years ago, building value drivers in command message, right? Of like, what are your customers' core problems? What are the signals for those problems? And how do you start to think about that? All right. So we talked AI use cases. We kind of talked 3 major use cases. We're classifying the headless CRM, right? Note taking, things like that. Karan, you mentioned Gong's a great solution. There's a number of others out there thinking about platform. Second being is like enabling and seller readiness. Like, how do we make sure that, sellers have at-bats, practice, all that type of good stuff? And I apologize, what was the tool you mentioned for that one, Karan?
We're using SalesHood for AI role plays. Is that what you're referencing? Yeah.
Yep, SalesHood. And then the third one was next best action, right? How do we in Focus, yes. Cool. We're about to talk about the future of RevOps and AI, but before we go on there, Alex has got a great question in the chat. From earlier topic, we're exporting Gong transpecs via API and scrubbing the GPT right now for that scoring and insights for calls and demos, and then grouping information and sales managers to those coaching insights weekly. Makes coaching far more fun. Oh, okay, cool. That's more of a comment. Any thoughts on that, Karan?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think it's pretty creative, right? So exporting the transcript, scrubbing, I think is interesting. I know Gong recently released this feature called call briefs, I want to say, which is essentially going in and taking those exact transcripts and translating them to like, here's what you learned from it. So I think they're trying to build some of this back in. Alex, I think the way you're probably doing it is more robust or more customizable, things like that. For me, I mainly just also think about, all right, if I've only got X amount of operators and Y amount of sellers, and I got to do everything at scale, otherwise I'm going to burn my people out. What is like the 80% readiness rule for me, right? Like, I'm not going to try to get to 100% perfection, but if I can scale it better, I'll do it that way. So I'm using the native AI features within Gong. It's working fairly well for us. Once in a while, maybe like once a quarter, I'll have us do a deep dive where I will have us, if there's a very surgical specific question I need to answer, like, hey, so-and-so competitor is eating our lunch. How do we think about and where are we seeing and what are we learning? Then I might do something more robust. But I think there's a little bit of a sense check as to which way you want to take it.
Love it. All right. So as we think about kind of like what's crazy, like I actually had somebody made a really interesting comment to me the other day. They essentially said, a lot of us are going to spend half our careers in this kind of like SaaS world and the second half of our careers in this like AI world, right? And we happen to kind of be bridging the two. We have a ton of RevOps practitioners on here, as well as I mentioned, go-to-market executives who are working with RevOps practitioners. How do you think about like what does the future of RevOps look like given some of these AI use cases, things like that?
I'm going to give it to you in like 2 time frames. One is very soon, and one is like more medium term. There's no such thing as long term anymore.
Yeah.
So one thing that I'm really excited about, where I'm seeing more and more energy around this, is look, we've spent a lot of time historically in pre-call planning. Let's call it like all these sales enablement tools like MindTickle, this, that, and the other. And we spent a lot of time as a practice or as a discipline in post-call coaching, Gong, things like that, right? What I've always found really peculiar, Reese, is that we don't spend much time solving for the call itself, which is the most critical part of the entire journey. What if you could get, like I use an example, I had a seller a while back, I was on a call with them and a prospect. It was a relatively new seller, and the prospect asked a pretty straightforward question, not that straightforward, but a question around like our experimentation platform and how can we be different than so-and-so customer, right? And the seller said, yeah, that's a great question. Why don't we convene next week when I bring my SC into the conversation and they can go deeper and do a show and tell with you. And I just remember gripping right there, thinking like, what if you could just answer it right then and there and you had data at your fingertips? So one, I think in the short term, what you're going to see is a lot more focus on the in-call experience because most people are virtual, right? Because AI can live record transcripts and realize meaning from it, interconnected with your slew of data points and LMS and HighSpot and this, that, and the other to pitch out the right information to you that you can then display to the customer. It's that like cybernetic thing that I'm referencing. There's a company I've spent a little bit of time with, which we're evaluating, called Threads, that's doing this right now, where they're just trying to layer on this live call transcription that can then turn around and say, hey, Reese just asked about a release observability. Here's the 4 data points you should know, and here's a case study that I just popped up for you right here and then, so you can solve the conversation, right? You can shorten sales cycles, makes things better. So I think that's one like immediate use case for AI, where it's like, hey, call for the real time. That's easy. I think that'll happen sooner than later and become really meaningful. Kind of like Gong was a couple of years ago. Here's a real answer though, the long-term answer. There's all these conversations about how with Cursor or Windsurf and OpenAI, people are going to start, there's going to be somebody who's going to build $1 billion product one day, all on their own or with one person or 2 people. Stands to reason, same thing's happening with go-to-market teams soon enough. When that co-pilot becomes autopilot, this notion of, hey, forget what PLG is or SLG, that whole thing's going to be just like noise at one point. There's going to be no such thing as just PLG or SLG. It's going to be this mesh. Can we use technology and AI to make it so that we artifact or sort of architect the entire website in a way that all the information flows through and the leads flow through, which are then prosecuted and followed up in a really meaningful way. And you are also going outbound with like an Amanda Kahlo's OneMind or equivalent, where you have a bot that actually is so realistic, and 11 Labs does a great job with voice and AI and things like that, to make it so that it feels like a seamless experience. And now every seller is your best seller, and every seller is audible and verbal ready all the time. They can go outbound, they can solve for inbound, they can do email, they can do quote unquote human interaction, they can progress the sales cycle, they can certainly build out the commercial details all the way from start to finish, to post-sale implementation, to customer success too. My point is that I see a world not that long from now, Reese, where we will see the ability to do that. Now, whether or not companies will do it, at what phase and stage, I'm not sure. Maybe it will be the companies that are bootstrapping and trying to be more unique and avant-garde, or the ones that are more digitally native. But I do see a world where what we do as operators, the go-to-market architect notion, right, will become so critical, because that person will literally be able to not just build the operational backbone of a go-to-market organization, but quite literally build the go-to-market organization. And I find that fascinating. Somebody's going to do it. Maybe not everybody will do it. Maybe it'll be a hybrid. But what I'm focused on here at Launch Darkly, for example, is I'm trying to tease out what that looks like for us now.
Yeah.
And between you and me, I think our job right now as leaders is to train our next generation of operators to be able to do it. So how do I take my ICs and my frontline leaders, et cetera, and coach and develop them in a way where they can eventually do that, to get them technology curious, to get them AI forward, to get them to think about processes and how it translates to the lowest node. That is the gig in my mind as a leader for the foreseeable future, because I think we'll transform revenue if we do.
And one just interesting note here, you made the comment, and I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So you talked about this like go-to-market architect, and just so everybody's on the same page, you know, you and I have obviously had a lot of conversations. We talk about this internally at Domestique all the time. There is this kind of shift of like, hey, you have your CRM admin right now. You've got your marketing automation plan, very point specific kind of technical admins. What you're describing as go-to-market architect is a couple of things. One, somebody who looks more broadly across the whole tech stack. And two, somebody who can start to fly, or at least be on a team that can fly to essentially say, hey, the company wants to be able to do this from a strategy and process standpoint. How do we then build that into the tech? Am I right? Like, I just want to make sure that like everybody's on the same page with what we're talking
I think you're right. I think eventually it's all going to become one sort of melded role, right? I mean, you can call it go-to-market architect, whatever. But I think in the near to mid future, what's going to happen is there's really two roles in ops that will matter the most, right? And by the way, I have reverence for every operational role, but I think the strategist, the revenue strategist, will be highly, highly valuable. They're like the artisanal sort of individual that's thinking big, and the human mind is still complex and interesting. You know, that one will still exist, at least for now, until robots replace us all. And then the second one is that technologist, that like up-level technologist that can take all that intelligence, that strategy, and translate it from start to finish into technology/process, which is really sort of cobbled together or sort of meshed together. I think those two roles are going to be crucially important. And eventually, you're right, they're going to all become one.
Love it. Love it. What like is, you know, as we think about this, right, the future of like, you know, and then say Terminator, we're all kind of like, you know, trying to fight the robots out. But in the meantime, right, this future of like, we can actually build these companies with a far more robust tech stack and less actual kind of like, you know, people were thrown at the problem. We talked about those kind of like use cases to start to step into that. Are there any other things you're kind of recommending to either leaders or operators about like, hey, how do we start to step into this like doing more with less concept?
So two things. One, broadly, it's what I said earlier. We have to continue to train and develop our people so that they're ready for this next phase of readiness. And then two, more tangibly and tactically, I actually think every operator now needs to be technology curious. Gone are the days where you can just sit there and make comp plans in a corner. Gone are the days where you can just do target setting in Excel models. Every operator needs to have a technology curiosity to them, right? And I don't mean like they need to know everything about Salesforce.com administration, but do I think that they all need to know how to use OpenAI and how to use, you know, some of these other tools equivalent of Perplexity, Cursor, this? Yeah, I do. So I think onus is on us to continue to train our people to do so. And I think you're going to learn a lot because everyone is coming from it from a different lens. My revenue planning folks are going to become technology curious, and it's going to translate how they think about revenue planning. My deal desk folks are going to go technology curious. It's going to change how they think about deal desk, et cetera, et cetera. So just that added layer is going to be critical. Whereas historically, at least in the last 5 to 7 years, and I've been at the forefront of this, Reese, I've been specializing everybody. I said, look, technology is its own function. RevTech over here. Don't bother them. You're not RevTech, Mr. Planner or Mrs. Planner. You're not RevTech deal management or enablement. We're going to now have to turn that back on its head. And I think that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. What haven't we talked about, particularly from an AI standpoint, that you think is important, whether it's kind of future state, tactical next steps, you know, anything else that we haven't talked about that as you're thinking about this AI stuff?
Only other thing I would say, which I combat today, and it's not a bad thing, it's because I've got really sharp leaders. They all come to me and say the same thing, right? Karan, dude, I get it. You love AI. look at all this stuff I got to go solve for. Can I just do the basics right? I got to run the business. I got some requirements from the business coming right now. I got initiatives coming. And you keep talking about how AI is going to eat the world. Calm down, right? So jokes aside, I think there's this like push and pull counterbalancing exercise that needs to happen, because you still got to do your day job, and you can't always be thinking about blue ocean, red ocean stuff, and you can't always be thinking about what the world could look like and how do I completely disrupt the paradigm, et cetera, et cetera. So I think just having empathy for your people and how they focus their attention is as critical as thinking in a sort of a progressive fashion. And Reese, I don't know if I've nailed it, right? I think sometimes I get too excited, but what I do know is I've got great leaders that I trust and that trust me, that come back and say, Karan, hey, you're on something. You got to calm down. And then other times I think they look and say, good, glad I listened to Karan and I pushed in a way because now my job got easier because of. So I would just say for all the leaders here, just be continually empathetic, seek to understand as much as you are looking to be understood with your people. And we will make that sort of cross that chasm along the way together. We can't go alone.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, we've got a few minutes left and would love to kind of open it up for questions. I know there's been a few questions along the way. What do we haven't talked about that's on your mind? Like, we've got 7 minutes, and for those of you who haven't met Karan, as you've heard, he's one of the smartest, thoughtful RevOps leaders I have ever met. So take advantage of this time. And just so everybody knows, I'm perfectly comfortable sitting in uncomfortable silence. So yeah, it's one of your.
What's one? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to make fun of Reese for a sec.
Oh, I was going to ask, Karan, what is an initiative at LaunchDark? Good to see you, by the way. That you're super excited about, like, what, you kind of talked about some things that you're really like kind of forward thinking on, but like, what are one or two other things that like you think are pie in the sky that you're excited to dive into but haven't yet?
Great question. By the way, Kyle, good to see you, pal.
No, it's been too long, dude.
See you here. Pie in the sky. I mean, look, I think for me personally, again, this doesn't sound super sexy, but bear with me. I think it's building a train and develop culture. I know it's not like the next AI solution, but the example I would give you is I have now monthly training sessions with all my team members, not just from me, but from other individuals. And we talk about things like decision-making frameworks, and we talk about how to do great program management, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason I'm focused on that is because I don't know how we elevate ourselves if we don't do the foundation well. I don't know how we step back and think about AI and the next great use case if we can't do the basics really well. So I'm one of those operators, Kyle, I think you're similar to me, where like you just want to make sure that the foundation is not a house of cards, that it's super strong, and you earn the authority to be that future thinker. So that's the thing that I geek out on. So I kind of single chair between, or sort of pendulum between the two sides of it.
I completely agree, and I'm with you. And I think actually one of the biggest up levels of AI that doesn't really get talked about is the ability to ingest a lot of information and transform it in a way that is specific to the learner, because everybody learns in different ways, everybody ingests in different ways. So like I think there's a whole opportunity to sort of unlock that. And there's a second piece to my question, which is I had a conversation a little while back with a friend of mine and said, oh, like we used I think they use Windsurf, and we built a CPQ, and I was like, ooh, that's interesting. But then I'm like, how does it scale? Because like there are certain things that like there's a lot of nuance to them. Like CPQ as an example is like at table stakes, it's very simple until you really get into the nuts and bolts of it, and then it like breaks. And like, so how do you kind of parse between, like, some of these are really nice to experiment with building your own thing, but then there's also a time and a place to like invest in a technology with a company that's all they think about all day long, and they've thought about all the permutations that can blow up when you get into some of these like really specific things.
It's a great question. I can't remember if it was Klaviyo or one of these big public companies sent out a mandate a little while back saying that I'm never going to buy enterprise software again. Kyle, I'm just going to build everything myself with AI. And when I first saw that, I laughed. I was like, oh, man, these guys are about to go down a total goat rodeo. The more time I think about it, though, so I'm wondering, like, will they be the first of many that eventually do this? And we're going to look back in history and say, man, they were onto something, even if they were early. So honestly, brother, I don't know the answer between the two, but what I can tell you is whether it's CPQ through Salesforce CPQ, or it's you're using Cursor or Windsurf to build your own solution, or you're hiring 50 developers to go do it because you got all the money in the world, the same problem arises with all of them. Didn't do proper requirements gathering, and I have a bunch of technical debt issues because I built a bunch of code the wrong way and didn't have proper test cases, blah, 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 blah. Basically, I didn't build it like I'm building a product as an engineering team. I built it like I'm a Salesforce admin seeing if I can cobble some stuff together. So not to go back to the foundational stuff, but I think actually the goal here is like, I don't care what the form factor is. If anything, the form factor makes things easier now with AI. Can you make sure you have the right best practices and principles?
It's the process.
Yeah. So that you don't get in trouble later. Because if you do that right, then yeah, you can manage new requirements in a meaningful way. If you don't, you're going to be unwinding the ball of yarn the entire time and suffering in silence because of it.
Couldn't agree more.
Love that. All right, we got 2 minutes left. One more question. Michael, you've come off mute a couple times.
Yeah. No, first off, this was awesome. So thank you for providing this. It was super helpful. One question I had, I think and this is honestly just trying to solve my biggest problem right now is forecasting. What have you seen in terms of that? Like, to me, it's like, one issue is like, okay, are reps doing close dates accurately? I know Clary has released some products in the space, but what have you found in that, and how can AI shape forecasting better?
I think there's a lot more we can do here. So I was a big, I've used Gong, I've used Clary, I've used Aviso, wouldn't recommend one of those, Aviso, but generally, my experience is that most of the deal scoring stuff they do, which is to me the like AI lens of all of this, is actually too rudimentary. It's, hey, let me look at historical trends and then therefore and thusly, or let me look at how many times you had an email sent out or a meeting, all that. I don't think that's helpful. I think Gong's getting better about it, but it's still not quite there. What we're doing here at Launch Darkly is we're actually looking to, and we haven't done this yet. This is one of the many things my team says, hey, hold on. We're looking to take all those transcripts and use it and ingest it in Snowflake, derive out the key signals that tell us, hey, this is what tells us this deal is about to come through, or it's going to progress, and use it to build our own more complex and robust scoring that we can then apply to a forecasting model. So now no longer is the scoring, hey, how many times did you meet with the customer? That doesn't mean anything. If I met with you 5 times and or the 15 times, and on the 15th time you told me to go kick rocks, Clary or Gong would say, hey, 15 times, good job, this deal's going to close, right? But I want to look at the transcripts, the data, that sort of stuff, Michael, and see if that can change how my forecasting models operate. I wouldn't say we're there yet. I haven't tested this thing quite yet, but I would agree with you. I think most forecasting models have not been effective. The only thing that's worked for me so far is having a really good, what I call CEP, customer engagement process. Some people call it sales stages, whatever, right? With milestones and deliverables and MEDPIC of signed, et cetera, and just holding everybody accountable to it. But that's more human. That's more frontline managers driving the process, pure stuff that we're expecting. But that's hard. So I want to get there. I'm not there yet. Let's do a race to it. See if you get there first, or if I get there first, and we can compare notes.
Yeah, I love it. No, I think the day we can improve forecasting, that'll be I don't know,
big.
amazing. So this is awesome. Thank you, though.
Well, first and foremost, Karan, thank you so much. As always, I truly enjoy these conversations. Our friendship is deeply meaningful to me. I want to thank everybody who's joined us today. We mentioned time's the most valuable asset. You took an hour of your day to join us, so thank you. We will follow up. You'll have the kind of video recording. If you got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always happy to kind of have these questions, and we're going to continue our monthly webinar series. We do it every month, and obviously we got a bunch of themes around AI coming up here and so on and so forth. But thank you all again, and I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your whatever today is, Thursday, and happy 4th next week to anybody here in the States. See you.
Appreciate you. Thanks all.